The Ski Museum of Maine presents 21st Century Ski and Snowboard Competition in Maine. Ever since there have been skis, there has been competition. Swedish immigrants brought the sport to northern Maine in the 1870s, but mainly as a mode of transportation. The burgeoning sport gained popularity with the emergence of winter carnivals in the early part of the 20th century. While ski jumping was arguably the first organized competitive aspect of the sport, Nordic competition was also becoming popular. In the 1930s, winter carnivals in northern Maine featured some of the first organized Nordic races in the state. At the same time, small hills were popping up over the southern part of the state, where organized alpine competitions were starting to gain popularity. Fast forward to 1971, when Sugarloaf hosted not only the World Cup and Tall Timber Classic, but also, because of a lack of snow in Europe, the downhill events of the famed Arlberg-Kandahar race. The 1990s saw the arrival of snowboarding, and a flurry of prestigious races were held at Sugarloaf, both snowboard and alpine. Some of these more notable competitions included the U.S. Chevy Trucks Alpine National Championships, the U.S. Snowboarding Grand Prix, and the U.S. Masters Alpine Championships. As with anything, the sport of skiing has evolved. Emerging in the 1960s and 1970s, freestyle skiing originally consisted of three disciplines: aerials, moguls, and ski ballet. The first major freestyle event that ever landed in Maine was a World Cup stop at Sunday River on January 27th and 28th in 2001. Events included the traditional aerials and moguls, as well as new style events. A NorAm Cup event followed in early February. How did Sunday River land this world-class event, and how much work was it to bring an event of this caliber to the state of Maine? Former Sunday River owner Les Otten explains.
Well, Sunday River had established a history of doing things in New England that hadn't been done before. And I think that whether it was snowboarding from side to side on the mountain, or it was the introduction of shaped skis, lift-served mountain biking, and the fact that the American skiing in that era had run a very successful X Games event at Mount Snow, we stuck our hand up and said, "Hi, we think we can run a world-class event at Sunday River." And it was a lot of hard work with a lot of people, but we were able to pull it off.
The World Cup visit in early 2001 would be the last freestyle event of such a high level until 2014. Through the early part of this century, new school freestyle continued to gain popularity, leading up to the inaugural Dumont Cup that was hosted at Sunday River in 2009. The Dumont Cup was the brainchild of local freestyle skier Simon Dumont. Simon Dumont grew up skiing the river and went on to become a leading figure in the world of new school freestyle. He now holds the world record for elevation out of a quarter pipe. In April of 2008, Simon aired 35.5 feet out of a 38-foot quarter pipe, performing an astounding cork 900 tail grab in the process.
We decided to come out here, build a big quarter pipe, and try to make a record happen.
In March of 2014, the 6th annual Dumont Cup drew Olympic athletes to Sunday River to compete in this now marquee event. The Dumont Cup has become the largest Pro-Am competition in the East. Under bright blue skies, spectators witnessed world-class freestyle as amateurs competed with the likes of Gus Kenworthy, Nick Gepper, and Josh Christensen. All three had recently medaled in slopestyle at the Sochi Winter Games. The 2014 Dumont Cup was the first to take place in the newly built T72 Park, and hopefully the first of many to come on this great new terrain. Elements of today's freestyle skiing were actually borrowed from snowboarding, which had its roots in the invention of the snurfer in Michigan in the mid-1960s. Through the 1990s, snowboarding became more popular and competitions became more numerous. In 1996, the first FIS events were held, and by 1998, snowboarding had become a Winter Olympic sport. One of Maine's pioneers in the sport is Nikki Pilavakis-Davorin, who started snowboarding at Saddleback.
Started when my parents moved to Rangeley, and I would come home from college and be cornered into going to the mountain. And I wasn't a good skier, and I worked on the lifts during school break, and one day I saw a snowboarder, and I had never heard of the sport before. And I saw this guy on one board, and I got out of my chair and I went outside and I followed him until I couldn't see him anymore, and that was it. And then I tried it, and for that whole rest of the winter, I beat myself up trying to teach myself, because then there wasn't any instructors and there wasn't any other snowboarders at Saddleback. And then the next year I moved to Sugarloaf and got a job as an instructor, and then later started working for CVA. And while I was there, there was the Bud Light Border Fest, and I entered and I won some money, and that was my sign.
Nikki's rise to snowboarding fame was rapid, and she quickly became a world-class competitor, excelling in border cross.
It was the most like racing your friends down the hill, and it didn't involve judges, and you didn't have to go upside down or spin around. It was just about speed and getting a good line, and it was fun.
In Switzerland in 1999, Nikki emerged with a #1 ranking by the International Snowboarding Federation and ended up the overall champion of the Swatch Palmer Border Cross Series. Unfortunately, an injury in 1999 effectively ended her competitive career. In 2014, Nikki became the first snowboarder to be inducted in the Maine Ski Hall of Fame. It was in the mid-1980s, while the sport was still relatively unknown in Maine, that a young Seth Westcott began snowboarding at Sugarloaf.
Just being around Sugarloaf, I think 1990 was my first halfpipe competition. It was when the New England Cup was still going, and so that Eric Webster, who was the first snowboard program director at CVA, brought that event here, and I did my first halfpipe contest and basically never turned back.
Seth attended Carrabassett Valley Academy, studying and training with other future Olympians.
CVA was amazing for me, and I got involved the first year that they started the weekend program for snowboarding. I was in that inaugural group. At that time period, especially with snowboarding, CVA really kind of had this mythic quality to it.
With such a local pool of talent, it was only natural that Sugarloaf became a venue for early snowboarding competitions.
96, we had the US Snowboarding Championships here. The following year, we had the inaugural US Grand Prix, which that series has gone on to this day. It's always been the Olympic qualifying series.
The snowboarding action of the 90s led up to a World Cup event at Sunday River in 2009. And this was followed by Seth's own annual event at Sugarloaf, the Banked Slalom. This open event originated in Oregon at Mount Baker.
So Banked Slalom is really the original competition in snowboarding. You know, Sugarloaf kind of came to me a few years back, and we're like, yeah, we need to get some kind of an event going. And so it's like, well, we're going to do this.
Like the Dumont Cup at Sunday River, the Banked Slalom is an open event.
You know, I think our youngest competitor was about 6 last year, and then we have guys in their 60s. And so, you know, they can all run the same course, and it's just a lot of fun. And it's more of, it just feels more of a community vibe when you're there at that event.
And it took a true community effort to bring the international spotlight to northern Maine when Aroostook County became the epicenter of biathlon in the United States. Combining Nordic skiing and shooting, the sport of biathlon literally means dual event. The sport mixes the endurance of cross-country skiing with precision marksmanship. The Maine Winter Sports Center was formed in 1999 to promote healthy outside winter activity across the state. In 5 short years, the center hosted its first ever World Cup event at its 10th Mountain Center in Fort Kent. Andy Shepard, president and CEO of the Maine Winter Sports Center, explains just what went into getting that first World Cup biathlon event to Maine.
When we approached the Libra Foundation for funding, the business model was based on using the sport of biathlon to be the engine for the Maine Winter Sports Center and for the economic revival of Aroostook County. And it's important to understand that biathlon, as I mentioned, is the largest winter sport in Europe, one of the largest in the world, over 1 billion TV viewers, and a big deal. So in our business plan, we put in our 5-year plan that we'd have a World Cup in Aroostook County. And if you take a step back and put it in the context that Americans might understand, it'd kind of be like a German farming community going to Roger Goodell and trying to make the case that even though they had no experience with the sport of football, even though they had no venues, a lot of them maybe have never seen the sport of football before, that they believed it'd be a good idea for the NFL to bring one of their playoff games to that small German farming community. And that's what we did.
2 years later, the Maine Winter Sports Center once again hosted a world-class event with the Youth and Junior Biathlon World Championships. These were held at the Nordic Heritage Center in Presque Isle. Andy explains that it was a true community effort.
Hosting these World Cups is like hosting an Olympics. The amount of logistical support necessary, the commitment within the community is extraordinary. So the Maine Winter Sports Center owned and kind of hosted the events, but the events were put on by entirely volunteer organizations made up from people within the communities. In Fort Kent, for instance, in 2004, we had over 500 volunteers for that first event. And that's from a community of around 3,000 people. So businesses were shutting down, people were taking weeks at a time to dedicate themselves to this event. It's not the kind of thing that most communities in the United States could do, but it's the kind of thing that Aroostook County can not only do, but do as well as anybody in the world.
In 2011, World Cup events were once again held in Presque Isle and Fort Kent, drawing huge television viewing audiences across the world. The Fort Kent World Cup event scored a record-breaking viewership of 140 million, proving that biathlon is globally the most popular winter sport in terms of television viewers.
When we had our World Cups in 2011, the first one was in Presque Isle and the following week was in Fort Kent. We had over 140 million TV viewers for that event. And just to put that into context, the Super Bowl last year was 109 million.
Maine did send an athlete to the biathlon in the Sochi Olympics in 2014. Stockholm native Russell Courier was on the U.S. biathlon team and competed in the Sochi Games. Andy explains how they are cultivating young athletes at the Maine Winter Sports Center.
The Maine Winter Sports Center has a range of programs in communities. We're in over 140 communities from one end of the state to the other, Elliott to Fort Kent and Greenville to the Outer Isles. And we have youth development programs, we have youth leadership programs, master's programs, but the programs that probably get the most attention are our athlete development programs. We've put 15 kids onto Olympic teams in our 15 years. And those kids come from a couple of different places. One of them is homegrown, coming all the way through the Maine Winter Sports Center program like Russell Courier. Or we also have a number of kids who are coming from around the country, know that Fort Kent and Presque Isle are kind of the epicenter of biathlon in the United States, and they want to come and train with us because of our track record. And finally, there's kind of a third avenue of athlete development, which is we send kids off to college to ski cross country, get an education. In a lot of cases, those educations are supported because they're great athletes, great skiers. And then the U.S. biathlon team will usually tap the fastest of those kids coming out of NCAAs and suggest that we can teach them how to shoot now that they know how to ski, and put them on an Olympic team. And we're seeing a lot of success with that as well.
On a side note, most folks don't know that the U.S. Biathlon Association is headquartered in New Gloucester, the only Olympic sport ever to be based in Maine. So the future looks bright for more competitive events in the state. With huge support in the county, the Maine Outdoor Center will host another World Cup Biathlon event in 2016. And on the alpine side, nearly every season features a handful of FIS-sanctioned alpine events at both Sugarloaf and Sunday River. And so the Pine Tree State continues to march toward the third decade of the 21st century, while continuing its long-standing tradition as a world-class host to top-level skiing and snowboarding events, while cementing its reputation for producing exceptionally talented athletes.
Just an old pair of skis that hang on the wall, an old pair of skis that somehow recall days at Sun Valley, carefree and true, the fireside laughter we knew. An old pair of skis that now wind their way down snowy white trails of memories today. Fond recollections, dearest affections that hang on the wall, just an old pair of skis. Just an old pair of skis that now wind their way down snowy white trails of memories today. Fond recollections, dearest affections that hang on the wall, just an old pair of skis.